and what's required of us. Marisa has looked into this. Marisa, you want to talk a little bit about that and what we've been doing and what we either should be doing or are doing already correctly?
Actually, I think I got the last of the minutes today, and
and what's required of us.
Yeah, all the committees are doing
into this. Marisa,
Oh,
you want
sorry,
to talk
hang
a
on
little
one
bit about
second.
that and what we've been doing and what we either should be doing or are doing.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. I was getting the recording feedback.
Oh, okay.
I've gotten minutes from all the meetings. They're all great. Thank you. If I had any notes for any of the committee chairs, I'd let you know. But basically, all the minutes came in.
Does anyone have any questions about how they either are doing them or should be done, how detailed they should be? They don't have to be as detailed as full board, correct?
Correct. The most important thing is to note who's at the meeting in terms of who's presenting on a certain application, what the public comment is and who's made the public comment, and then what actions are being taken. And those prompts are there for you in the minutes template if you want to use it.
Okay. One of the things that Marisa and I have been talking about is, and over the years I've thought about this, I may have mentioned it to some of you, and that is whether or not we would ever enter into our minutes a note about the discussion. If the discussion was in fact, let's say there was a large minority discussion, would we put it in, and not in any detail, but to just say after some discussion which entailed members of the board bringing to the attention of the board such and such and such and such. I mean, we've never done that, but I personally feel that we miss a lot of what I think is important that goes into the determination and the final result that comes out of a full board meeting in particular. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, and we may want to think about it, but it was always kind of shot down when I suggested it. I'm open to us continuing to not do that, but I do think, or I would ask everybody, think about it. If you have any comments now, you can make it, but otherwise we can talk about it at another time.
I think it's a good idea. I think it would be a more thorough reflection of how we reach our determinations, especially given that we don't give minority reports at the full board. That would be a way to capture, if there is a non-unanimous vote, what was the view of the dissenting minority.
Craig, what do you think of in terms of doing the minutes that way? Will that be something? I know Kim takes it off of the tape. Do you think that's going to be difficult? Do you think this would work? Should we think about it? Should we consider it?
I mean, so you're talking about just at the committee level, right? Not at the full board level.
No, full board.
But the full board level. I mean,
I got confused then. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's what I thought you were talking about. Yeah,
I'm thinking about both, actually. But the fact that we don't do any of that at full board, I think it's important for the full board, because that's the one that if people want to know how did Community Board 5 deal with this, they're going to look at the full board minutes. So I'm thinking of the full board, but I think it would apply to committee meetings as well.
Well, would they? I mean, if somebody wants to look at what Community Board 5's position was or discussion was, they'll look at the reso, right? And that's
look at what?
The resolution that was passed.
But they won't know what went into the discussion. And
yeah, so I guess, does that mean if we have a resolution that 10 people on the board support and make comments about in support of it, if let's say we were to have a bike resolution against bikes and 10 people spoke against, on the David Kalis one about bikes, or whoever said something about bikes, would we record that as well? Or are we just recording why I voted against it? Because then you're getting to a slippery slope of why are you recording just some or reporting just some and not the other piece? Right? Removed.
I don't think I've ever thought about it in it quite like that. I've often thought of someone who brings up a point. I'm trying to think of an example. Layla, can you think of one where because you and I have talked about this, where we thought that it was important that something was brought to the board's attention, but it didn't necessarily go into the reso, and it wasn't in particular a dissenting viewpoint. It was something that is important. I guess the more we talk about it, the more difficult. Okay, Clayton, 1 second. The more difficult it would be, because the person who's transcribing would have to figure out whether or not it's important enough to put it in. Maybe we should forget about it. But Clayton, what do you think?
Well, one example that comes up occasionally is, especially for the benefit of members of the public or new board members, anytime that a committee chair might explain or remind the board why it is that we are doing a deny unless or an approval with conditions, that whole thing, like a conversation around strategy and the city agency receiving it, that's never going to be in a resolution, but it might be useful to have that in a public record if somebody is trying to figure out why we worded it that way.
What if I could do this as chair and work with Craig on it, that during the meeting, and maybe a couple others that we could assign to do this, make notes of things that we think might be important to put into the minutes collectively, rather than have it up to one person, rather than having to decide, is this important enough? Then we can look at what the group came up with. Again, we don't have to decide this tonight, but since minutes have become not only, I mean, I've always felt they were important, but they've been singled out more so than ever before on the importance of keeping them and posting them and having them readily available and so on. So I thought maybe we ought to think about that.
I mean, I generally don't see that much detail. This one says this and this one feels this. You know, I just don't, minutes aren't transcripts. They're two very different things. And minutes are really actionable steps. So we passed this resolution, and this is the resolution, or stuff like that. I don't traditionally think, you know, I can look at like the parliamentarian's guide or some parliamentarians guide, but minutes are not transcript. They're very different, and they generally don't go into too much detail. Just we did this, we did that. You know, explaining policies of the board. You know, I don't know if that's really what goes in there.
Yeah. I know, and I don't think it would be that often.
Right.
What I think, where I've always come out on this the way I have, is because when I read them, they say after a lengthy discussion, and then we don't know what that lengthy discussion was. So I often thought, if we do have, and sometimes we get into a really, you know, dig down in discussion, that even after the full board meeting, people will say to me, that was really good meeting. We really got into that. Maybe we should think about that kind of thing. I think I agree with you, Craig. I don't think that's going to happen that often. Right. But very often not very often, when things come up that are afterward kind of memorable and that we would like to put in the record, maybe we ought to think about putting it in.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking about is a couple of months ago when we had the resolution on to fund the police, and that went on for a long time. How much detail about that? I mean, that was a very good conversation, a very long conversation. How much would we put in? I mean, that's a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting an answer right now, which is something that we should think about. That as an example, when we had the homeless shelter discussion a couple of months ago, that was a very long discussion, and it was a great discussion. But would you put that? I mean, that could literally be 4 pages of minutes,
no,
right? You wouldn't want that.
No, not at all. Well, is everyone okay with us thinking about this, pursuing it, and maybe coming up with some suggestions at least?
I'm curious whether any other boards do it. Have you seen a model that you like?
Yeah. I'm just thinking of that as well. That's why I was just gonna, I wrote myself a note to check other minutes just to see if anybody else does the same. I feel the same way. All right, I'll
Yeah.
check it out and
Yeah.
bring it back, okay? Let's see. Oh, we had a case where, and this is unusual, but it may come up more than it has in the past. Someone from the public was at a committee meeting and asked if they could speak on a subject that was not on the agenda, and that's very unusual. And so after talking to a few of you about this, the conclusion that we came to was that we would allow it, but it would be considered new business at the end of the meeting. And maybe anyone could make a chair could make an announcement and say, if anyone from the public wishes to address an issue with us that is not on the agenda tonight, you'll have your chance at the end of the meeting with new business. And if they're, if they're really want to do this, they'll hang around for the meeting and say what they have to say. So that was the consensus. Excuse me. That was the consensus of those of you that I spoke with, and I just want to make sure that everyone is in agreement with that. It was the easiest way to handle it, rather than, we don't want to tell people that they cannot. So where do you put them? You don't want to have a public session at the beginning of a committee meeting. That's not the way we operate. And then we always say to them, bring your comments to the full board meeting. You'll have 2 minutes. But in this case, if it happens, we'll do it at the end under new business.
The only caveat to that is that the committee can't take any action on that. It's really just to hear the comments, because it's not noticed. They can't take any action.
Right. Well, it's not for action. In fact, I think, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it should be made clear by the chair that it's just like the public session, where they're only apprising us. They're not asking questions. It's not to be a dialogue. And it's definitely nothing with any action. And I think that has to be clear. It's very similar to the public session, where it's just to give us information. This happened in particular in parks. The person who spoke was interested in having gardens in parks, and she made her statement, and Clayton said, "Thank you very much," and that was it. So is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Yes.
All righty. Clayton, do you want to talk about attendance during COVID and virtual meetings and the things that we've discussed because of the difference of not having a body in the room and knowing who's there at what time and for how long?
Sure. So this is something that we've been talking about, and just thought it would be good for everyone to be thinking about it, committee chairs, especially on Zoom board meetings. Attendance is a little bit different, especially now that for my committee, for example, we, for the last 3 months, have had agendas that are much lighter on action items, and some agendas with no action items whatsoever. So the question begs the question, what is attendance based on if there's no votes? So Vicky suggested, roll call just for attendance. And the idea was doing it at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting, so that you have an accurate snapshot of who was there. And another idea was having that roll call happen not at the very start of the meeting, because it's okay for people to be a few minutes late, that happens, whatever. And in a normal committee meeting, the first vote doesn't normally happen until well into the meeting. So if we wanted to be a little bit more analogous to how it works in the real world, we could have roll call happen, for example, after the first agenda item, no matter what it is, a discussion, a presentation, or kind of arbitrarily pick a time, do it at 6:20 or whatever it is. So there's a few different ideas that and I don't know if we have to resolve this right now again, but just for committee chairs and everyone to be thinking about what makes the most sense and what is good for managing expectations for people, and also just seems fair and as simple or streamlined as possible would be great too.
Renee, your committee in particular, this applies because you have so many, look at last month, you had so many discussion items. People can, and it's hard to keep saying to people, you know, put your video on, but the fact is they can come in, be on for 5 minutes, take the video off and leave for an hour. And you don't know that they're not there and they're not, you know, being a part of the listening to or wanting to have anything to do with the discussion. So what does everybody think?
Can I just ask, in terms of attendance, what is the requirement? Apart from, I know that we take attendance.
Your attendance has to be the same as a full board meeting. I mean, as a, you know, as the same requirements for attendance for full board are the same for committee. So you have to attend, you know, a certain number per year. You have to be there for no more than so many present part, that kind of thing. It's exactly the same.
Thank you.
For example, you can't miss 3 in a row.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, if you can, you get a warning, but theoretically 3 in a row, we can start taking action.
Mhm. Thank you.
Bless you, Nick. What do you think, everybody? Renee, do you think that would work for your committee?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I like Clayton's idea that in the middle, you know, if there's no action items in the somewhere random time in the middle, you just sort of chart who's there. I don't know.
My feeling is if we do 6:30 and then at the end of the meeting, you've really, I think, gotten the people who've been there full time.
The only problem with a specific time is that, you know, the chair may not want to interrupt the conversation exactly at 6:30. I think we need to build in a little discretion on the chair as to when it comes within the flow.
Well, I guess on that point, do we need to do a formal roll call? I mean, for example, like on parks, I never do a formal roll call. I look around, I see who's there. There's 19 people or whatever, 18 people on the committee. I do it's similar to what I do at the beginning of our full board meeting. I look through, I see who's there, I check, I take attendance, and then I send a text to Clayton and say, we're at quorum, we're okay. And I can do that quietly, you know, at any point during the meeting, whether it's 6:30 or 8:30 without having to interrupt. Do we need to do a formal roll call as opposed to, say, the vice chair just looking? I mean, it's easy to look.
You also have the video.
Right, that's right.
No, but my point is there are a lot of people that are not on video. They say they're there.
So
Well,
doing
maybe
the roll
that's
call
the-
to make sure people are paying attention, so to speak.
Maybe that's the problem we need to address. That in order
Yeah.
to be present at a meeting, your video has to be on.
Well, and it's interesting to me that I don't know about you guys on committee, but I don't think we ever have people with their cameras off at committee. It seems to be much more prevalent at full board. I'm not sure if you have the same experience, everybody.
Same experience for landmarks and land use.
Which, did you say it's on or off during the committee?
It's
We
on
don't-
the committee.
The videos are on.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a few, I'm thinking of Evan in particular, who watches his kids at that time, that he goes on and off and he's texting me the whole time. You know, my daughter's screaming, I gotta go, you know, that sort of thing.
I know during full board, the last few meetings I've counted, I think at one point I counted 9 or 10 people that were on, you know, their videos were off. And they were off for a period of time. It wasn't like you got to get up and go to the John or whatever. It was, and I think that's why it's stuck in my mind. I'm thinking, are they there? Are they, you know, are they? And then a couple of times we wound up with not having them respond to the roll call because they weren't there.
So I think that's the problem to solve. And I think that, you know, while we're having video meetings, I think the rule has to be, in order to be present, your video has to be on.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're not present.
Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Well, just out of curiosity, so in the case that Renee puts on, sorry to add a hiccup on this, in the case that Renee spoke, Evan goes to take his kid to the bathroom, whatever, you know, for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
I mean, he's not going to keep his video on because, you know, why would you keep your video on for that? Is that mean that he's only present part, even though he's just missing 5 minutes? Because would we say he's present part if he went to the bathroom at Xavier High School for 5 minutes? You know, what is the threshold?
Well, you can't miss a vote. If you miss a vote, you know, then you're not present. And then maybe it's up to the chair. Maybe it's a discretion of the chair. If he's missing a large part of an important part of the conversation, then you know, it might be up to the chair to mark him present part.
That makes sense to me. You know,
If somebody leaves to go to the restroom and misses a vote, do we count that as present part? I mean, very often in the old days, we knew that someone was there, and I've heard them say, oh, they just stepped out for a minute.
Right.
They missed the vote, but they didn't leave the meeting. So they're really not present part, are they?
I believe that in the past, when we were meeting in person, if someone missed a vote, even if it was to go to the bathroom, often you would have a board member who would step out with an applicant to deal with some ongoing issue, and they would miss a vote, and I think they would be marked present part.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say 100% that's
Yeah.
of the time, because I'm sure there have been pocket exceptions, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the high majority of it.
What about a scenario in which people are turning off their video because their Wi-Fi connections are unstable?
Yeah.
Is there a world in which we ask people up front, like keep in the back of our mind, obviously somebody who is consistently not using video might be problematic because they are actually leaving. But if there are occasions in which they advise you in advance, or advise Marisa that they will be unable to be on video tonight, that they're still counted as being present, particularly if they're able to vote. My concern would be is if somebody has a problem with connectivity, or is with a mobile phone, or any sort of situation where they can't be on video because of where they're located. We just want to be careful of that, not exclude them.
You know, I'm glad we're talking this out, because maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe we should leave it up to the chairs to, I guess, determine in some way if someone is taking advantage on a regular basis, not one night. I mean, it does have complications for all the reasons that you've all brought up.
I mean, I think that there has to be flexibility and discretion for all these reasons, and that's important. But I also think it's important to be really clear about the expectation. And Vicky, you do this already, but maybe even more and more frequently, and maybe stronger language, saying, you know, last full board, we had 13 members or 9 members or whatever, whose cameras were off virtually the entire meeting. And it's difficult for morale, it's difficult for engagement, yada, yada. So that everyone understands that, yeah, of course, there's going to be times when, or if your Wi-Fi is bad, there's always going to be cases, but just to set that expectation so the standard is really clear.
Okay, that's a good idea. And I will not do that at this board meeting, because I'm giving them a little hubba hubba on a couple of other things. I'm not going to overwhelm them with, or scold them with too many things. So, which takes me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the chat in our Zoom meetings. What I had planned on saying to the full board on Thursday, and I want you to see if it sounds right and if anything should be added or taken away. The chat is to be used only to alert us to technical difficulties or operational questions or information like an email address or a link that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. In keeping with our mandate to adhere to the open meetings law, any remarks about CB5 business or questions about agenda topics should be made on the record by raising your hand through the raise hand feature. And then I'm just going to mention that some boards have deactivated the chat because some of the necessary discussion that needed to be spoken publicly was taking place there instead. And this is what we ran into last month, actually, which is why I'm now addressing it. So please keep this in mind tonight and for all future public virtual meetings of the board and its committees. We did wind up with a back and forth by a board member, and it wasn't the only one. I've seen it before where they start talking either to each other. It's a little different, and it doesn't, the open meetings law doesn't apply if you're sitting physically in a meeting and you lean over to your, somebody who's next to you and say, how are you going to vote on this? Can you give me an idea? That's different. But when you put it in the chat and you start having a banter, so to speak, back and forth, or, really things that are supposed to be on the record, which is the discussion that goes into coming to a conclusion and a decision on an application, it can't be done in chat. And other boards have found that to be problematic as well. Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying
Sure.
question, Vicki? So you'll notice on this Zoom meeting that the chat is not enabled. But there are a few different ways to do it. So you can enable chat just for the panelists and not for the attendees. But I think that once you start with the chat, we wouldn't be able to disable the chat for panelists in the middle of the meeting, for example, or enable the chat in the middle of the meeting. But we can change folks' ability, so for attendee, we can disable the chat for particular attendees or just disable it in general for all attendees.
Layla, we disabled it for landmarks, right?
Yes, and for land use.
And for land use.
Yeah. And personally, as chairing a committee, I found that it was much more quiet. I didn't have the distraction, and I don't believe that I missed out on any information that anyone was trying to communicate with me.
And we still have Q&A, correct?
Yes.
We don't have the Q&A function that Zoom offers. We did not enable that, but we never. I have never used it in the committees.
There are some boards that use that as the way that they allow people to ask questions only. But in our case, we call on them and they verbally ask the question. Yeah.
With a T&E meeting that had, I think, several hundred attendees, it came in handy. But for a normal sized committee meeting,
yeah, actually you did. EJ, you did all your questions through the chat. I mean, through the Q&A on that meeting, didn't you? I don't think you took anybody speaking. I think it was all written out.
Yes, it was a particularly huge and contentious issue where we suspected that everyone was going to want to weigh in.
Mm-hmm.
It was particularly an issue where bike advocates, on one side of the issue were particularly, they all want to raise their hand and speak up, even if someone has made the exact same point before. Same thing on the other side of the issue as well, in terms of residents. It was analogous to when we, had to move the committee to an even bigger venue because we knew so many people were coming out. So in that particular situation, yeah, it worked out really well for one big contentious issue like that. Like, we knew there were going to be in excess of 100, 200 people in attendance. It did work in that situation. For most other committee situations, I would say that raise hand has worked fine.
Mm-hmm. So is it everybody's agreement that we keep the chat, but make sure that, and maybe it would have to be done once in a while, is to remind everyone the use?
I personally agree with Layla. I have found the chat to simply be distracting during a meeting. You've got people from the presenting party trying to answer, attendee questions in the chat. And so the attendee is getting the answer, but all the committee members might not be aware of the answer. And I personally support just shutting down the chat entirely And as with an in-person meeting, making sure that all statements are made in succession when recognized by the chair.
If, all right, you're saying take it off completely the way Layla did at her meetings. Okay. I would prefer that in the full board because I find it distracting. What I think would have to be done though is that when it comes time for Q&A, we could announce that anyone who may have missed a certain information or a link or something that was given to the board, or somebody can say, I'll drop a link here, and they won't be doing that because the chat will not be open, that they should contact the board office.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely, I mean, maybe Marissa, if it was possible to like just limit it to literally the hosts, not even just the panelists, but like perhaps Vicky and you, if there's something that needs to be distributed to everybody at the meeting.
Well, that's
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Are there ways to actually program the chat so that only maybe you, Vicky, and you, Craig, and you, Marissa, can contribute? Like typing in the chat box, but it can be seen by all.
Let me look into that. I've looked into attendees versus panelists, but I didn't look at hosts specifically. So let me see if you can segment those out.
okay.
Because then EJ's suggestion would be really good, so that if we need to communicate some information, a link to something, or clarify a date
For the usual instructions about how to use the raise hand feature.
Yeah, but then no one else would be able to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Shall I speak about it Thursday, and instead of saying that it will be available for that purpose, say for the time being we're deactivating it, and any questions or information that you may need, check with the board office. Shall I wait for you, Marissa, to see?
I mean, well, I can have the answer tomorrow morning, so I can certainly get that to you before board.
Either way, even if we have, say, the three of us, or at a committee meeting, the committee chair, the committee vice chair, and you, it would be the same. It would be deactivated for everyone else, correct? That's what you're asking EJ and Layla, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder if just asking people to use their common sense, that they can't have cross conversation, they can't do things. I wonder, because we haven't tried that yet.
Has that generally worked in the past?
I don't know.
Is there a reason why you want to keep it, Nick?
No, but the only things I can think of that are helpful when the electeds are giving their presentations, they drop a link to their report in the chat. Or if they're referring to something, a document or something, they can drop a link in the chat. Sometimes that's helpful. That's really the only example I can think of where we would want to keep it.
We can give a heads up to all those reps and let them know that if there's anything that they would want to drop in the chat, just like if you were meeting in person, they would bring their printed newsletter or their report, they can send it to us ahead of time and we can put it into the chat.
I think it really helps. This is from a personal standpoint, chairing, to not have to worry about the chat, because it is distracting.
Well, it shouldn't be your responsibility. I mean, we could have Luke look at it, or what?
I'm nosy.
No, but we could assign someone to monitor the chat, and if we see conversations, then Marissa would write in, sorry, you can't use the chat for this.
Mm-hmm.
Until people get used to not using it at all, or we could take it away.
Any other thoughts?
Certainly for my committees, I'm totally in favor of taking it away.
Taking it away.
I really see no value. It's distracting, and you kind of still need to keep an eye on it, because if something absolutely egregious is happening in the chat and you don't know about it, and you continue, you become totally irrelevant. I don't think, and as you said, Vicky, you know, for the sake of, you know, transparency and, you know, it has to be in the record, and therefore it has to be, you know, any valuable comments have to be spoken out so that they become, you know, part of the record.
Clayton and
I agree
Renee.
with that. And also if two attendees in any of our committee meetings were having like a side conversation with each other during the meeting, we would stop
Say
them
something.
entirely and ask them to stop.
Yep. Clayton and Renee, the other two committees, how do you feel about it?
I'm
I
happy.
definitely don't. I don't like being distracted by it during the meeting. It annoys me. It's annoying, and it also slows everything down because I actually have to kind of stop
Yep.
whatever facilitation is happening to read it and catch up. And it might be important or it might not.
Yeah.
I see a
Renee?
difference. I see a difference for committee meetings because there is really no public session during the committee meetings. The electeds aren't dropping anything. So I can see the logic behind not having it at all at the committee level.
So maybe we'll do, and Renee, is that okay with you?
Absolutely, I agree.
Okay. Maybe we'll drop it from committee and then think about Maurice's suggestion and or Layla's also suggestion about having 2 or 3 of us handling it in the way of information. If we want to drop information, you know, Marisa, you'll talk to the electeds, they can give you information, you can drop it into the chat. But then would everybody see it if we're dropping chat?
Well, I mean, that's what I have to confirm
Oh, okay.
tomorrow.
All right. Okay, well, I'll let you go with that, and on, I'll figure out what to do on Thursday based on what you find out tomorrow, okay?
Okay.
Okay, last, just to let all of you know, we did have someone at one of the committee meetings mention that they were abstaining because they wanted to be neutral on a particular position, and 2 other people followed suit, and it was a public meeting, and I think it's important, even if the greater majority of the board understands and knows that an abstention definitely is not a neutral position, I want to go over it again, especially because it was a public meeting and that was said, and 2 relatively new board members went along. Well, all 3 of them were new, relatively new. But the other 2 went along with it. And so I really think it's important. So tomorrow I want to send out my explanation that I usually give at orientation about how all the yeses go into one box and everything else, the abstentions and the noes go into another. So basically an abstention is a silent no, and be very, very judicious in terms of how you use an abstention. You have every right to use it if you want to, but don't think for a second that it's a neutral position. So that'll go out tomorrow as well. And then we have one item before we get to our committee meetings. And this one, I really tried to put together the pieces. And this is the Flatiron Bid Extension. I do not expect us to vote on this. First of all, we haven't noticed it, so we really shouldn't vote on it. I don't think we should anyway. I'll try and put the pieces together, and Renee, you can jump in and help just so that I explain to everyone, because what I'm looking for is affirmation or discussion on whether or not this should go to the full board as a committee on the whole on Thursday night. So let me look at my notes because I was trying to put it together today. In March, the board office, I guess it was Wally, referred the issue of the expansion of the Flatiron bid to the BEX committee. We're not quite sure why, but we think, and I think Renee, this was the understanding that it's because it was going through small business. Is that why?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So it went to BEX, and basically the committee felt that everything was copacetic, no changes, and therefore it was a resolution and it was approved by the full board. I couldn't find the reso, I didn't have time, but I think it was unanimous. Do you remember if it was?
I believe it was unanimous at BEX, but I think it was ultimately approved at exec. Am I right, Marisa, on the resolution?
Oh,
It
maybe
was
that's
a-
why I couldn't find it.
It was approved at the March full board
Okay,
meeting.
all right. And I think it was,
Oh, March is the month that we didn't have the full board meeting.
so I think it was probably exec. I'm pretty sure the resolution actually was then approved by exec.
Maybe that's why you don't remember it, Layla.
Hmm.
You know, it didn't go before the full board. Okay. All right. So everything went along for months. And in October, we were notified that they were coming back. And because it was sent to Bex in March, it was sent back to Bex in October. It actually came to you in the November cycle, Renee. Came to Bex in the November cycle. And at that point, at the end of the meeting, I was at that meeting, they dropped a little bomb by saying, okay, this is going to go to ULURP, so be expecting something from ULURP, which set off a big ring in my head saying, if it's going to ULURP, why is it going through Bex? Why didn't we put it through land use? And it all happened, we got the notice, the actual notice on Friday the 4th, which was last Friday, saying, okay, it's in ULURP and you have to answer by January 4th. Now, if nothing had changed, we would be probably content using the resolution that we had in March. However, the change, there was a change that came about. It had to do with a difference in taxing new high residential buildings on 6th Avenue. Correct me, Marisa, wasn't that the main reason that
Retail space,
the
I
main
think,
change?
right?
What's that?
Not fully residential. They had to have retail space, if I'm
Okay. But it was a change from what you had heard in March. I don't feel comfortable with us keeping the resolution unless the full board agrees to do so. I want to make sure that you guys agree with that, because I think it has to be made clear to everyone. There have been changes. It may make a difference to some. And the only way to do that is we can't change the resolution without taking it to the full board. So I'm asking if we as a committee want to put it on the agenda, which we have the right to do. That's what we're here for.
I think that's appropriate, and I think we'd be remiss not to. And one of the main reasons, in addition to just the merits of the process, is also that I would hope that, as a matter of public record, that the Flatiron Bid and anyone else paying attention understands that if something is going to ULURP, you can't just let us know after it's been heard by a different committee. I mean, I'm assuming that was just a random oversight, but it's something about it is very wrong, and so we should be robust in publicly writing it.
We can't really figure out how it happened. It did, and whether or not there's blame, it doesn't matter. It happened and could have been innocently done. I don't know. I don't even know how it got to Bex. I mean, I kind of understand how it may have, but it did. And so now here we are with this. So does anyone have any comments, or do you feel that we're fine in just moving it onto the agenda? And I don't know who would make the presentation. I guess Renee.
I just want to point out, just to Clayton's comment on the Flatiron Bid, while they knew it was going through city planning, I think the issue was the timing. They really didn't have a sense of the timing. So at the Bex meeting, they did say that we would be hearing from city planning, but I had no idea that the turnaround would be quite that quick, and it wouldn't be able to come back to the board to another committee at that point. So they really came to the board as an update in their process, more than you know, to get any finalized ruling from the board.
Marisa, do we know when it was certified by city planning? Because ULURP is extremely codified. You know, usually my understanding is that ULURP, we have 60 days. Is it not a 60-day referral period?
I mean, it looks to me like it's a 30-day referral period because it came to us on what is it, the 3rd or the 4th?
And
deadline is January 4th.
Or it came from the applicant?
It came from DCP.
Okay, interesting.
The notice came from DCP, not from Flatiron.
I mean, Layla, aren't there certain cases where the window is 30 days in like random weird administrative?
I guess we just experienced it.
There's ULURP and there's ULURP. Like this is a bid expansion, which I think is a funny little thing in and of itself, as opposed to your normal course of ULURP review, right?
Yeah, except that if it's called ULURP, then it should taste like ULURP.
But I think that's a little bit, Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit of a misnomer from what I kind of understand about this process.
You know, I don't know enough to say whether I'd call it a misnomer or not. It certainly doesn't seem like it's the same process as other land use ULURP applications.
Where is this application that DCP sent? Do you have it, Marisa?
I don't think I have the application. I have the notice from DCP. I will look for it while you guys are talking and can forward it to you if you like.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know.
The original, Layla, is that what you're asking for?
Whatever is on record with DCP, yeah. I don't know if that would be the original because it looks like they also filed something with small business services.
Very confusing. All right. So we will put this on the agenda, and Renee, can you walk everyone through it, how it went through the committee and what was discussed and what has changed?
I can in more detail. Right. So originally, if you'll recall, the Flatiron bid came to the community board and explained that they were thinking of expanding their reach, and they had a map that went over to 6th Avenue and up to about 31st Street, and that map underwent some iterations. Once that was finalized, they came to the board again and they presented in great detail, I think I still have the presentation, exactly what they were looking for, how they were doing outreach to community members. They were doing outreach to all the apartment buildings, or trying to get their approval for and support for expanding the bid. And then they had to do a certain number of mailings, my understanding is, to stakeholders and get a certain number back. I'm going to go back and revisit my notes on that. And then once they got that certain number of support, whatever it was, they moved into the legislative process. And they had to get the approval from city council to do that. And they reviewed, the district plan was reviewed and it went to city council. And then city council reviewed the outreach and the planning activities, which is where they did, you know, how many buildings they contacted, how many people gave approval. And for the most part, the numbers are small when you look at it relatively. Marisa, I don't know if you recall this as well. The numbers are small relatively, but the people who did responded positively to the expansion of the bid. And the way they posited it was that they're going to offer quite a lot of benefits to the area. They're going to do the street cleaning and the homeless outreach and all of the other benefits that they offer to the businesses. And many of the commercial entities were happy to sign on. Not all, not a ton, you know, as a percentage of the whole, but they had done the required outreach. And now they're in this stage where they've met. I believe they went to the public hearings part, and that's part of this ULURP thing where they're going to go to the public hearings piece of it. I'm going to go back and review my notes so that I can more fully explain it, but that's basically what happened. And they came to us, when they came to us back in, I believe it was February, the board was unanimously in favor, I'm talking about Bex, for this expansion, which ultimately goes over to 6th Avenue. I need to bring up the map for you, but it goes up, it almost hits the Midtown. It doesn't quite go to 34th Street. It's more like 30th, 31st. There's a little cutout around 33rd Street and then over to Lex.
Okay.
And there was one public comment at the meeting, and then a couple of follow-up letters from some folks that wanted the bid to actually extend
Up to 34.
over up to 32nd Street, I think, from 31st Street.
So I will just say very quickly, not as a member of the land use committee, but as a resident who would be directly impacted by this expansion, that I am opposed to the expansion, and my building, my condo, is opposed to the expansion. I find that the lack of clear mechanism as to how these taxes are levied and how they can be altered, I find that to be problematic. So although today the tax on residential buildings is $1, it can very easily and without too much accountability to the constituents of the bid, it can be altered. And the bid is basically appointed in sort of like in perpetuity, and it's not democratic. They're not elected. You can't vote them out of office if you feel that the taxes that they are assessing is excessive. I'm speaking for the rest of my condo, they feel that we're not going to get really any value out of the work that the bid does. They certainly see the value to the retail spaces, but they and I kind of agree with them, feel that having one additional garbage can is no justification for having this release of power to an organization that then becomes a de facto ruler of the block. So I will be voting against the bid expansion.
All right, so we'll have it as part of the agenda. We'll have it as a committee of the whole. Renee, you'll give the background on it. Now, how should we do it? We have a resolution from March. Should we include that in the packet and have it as above it, something like committee of the whole to discuss revision or something like that of the following resolution? The resolution is written, I have it in front of me, it's written to lead you to an approval, which might be the way the full board goes as well. So I think in order to have something to look at and to understand or to remember what went on in March, not only that, now that you brought to my attention that was done by exec because we canceled the March full board meeting. The full board meeting, the full board members never saw this. No. So I would suggest that we include it in the packet, that we give it a heading explaining what it is, and let the questions and comments take us to whether or not we're going to just add to this and still approve it, or make it a disapproval or whatever. But I think we have to have something to work with, especially since no one saw it in March.
Does the applicant have the opportunity to present?
Yeah, well, no, we don't do that. What we do is, well, last time we did a committee of the whole, we did not have a presentation, no. But they can come and speak at the public session, and he has to be, the head of that bid has to be apprised of this tomorrow morning so that he has time, or even tonight, so that he has, what's today, Tuesday? No, he has time to come, and make his presentation during the public session. Do we have any, do we have anything that was given to you, Renee, that we could include in the packet?
I was just going to ask that. There's a lot of material that we can include in the packet, including all the outreach, the maps, the services that they provide. You know, they do a very comprehensive, they've done it for the committee, and then just again, a very comprehensive presentation about this. They've done to all community groups. So if I could get that packet and include it, it's very informative just in terms of the numbers, you know, what they've actually done, what they've achieved, how many people they've reached out to, all of that.
Would that be helpful, Nick? I think that would work. It's very comprehensive now that I think about it.
I mean, I was just thinking more along the lines of enabling them to address questions like Layla had. If this was a typical committee meeting, Layla would ask her questions and the applicant would be able to answer them. If we do it this way, we deprive the applicant of the opportunity to answer those questions and other questions that other board members may have. So it's not really, you know, it's not really a hearing of the matter.
Right, I actually agree, because I think had they known that it might have, should have gone to land use, they would have definitely, my sense is they would have definitely been there, as opposed to Bex.
Okay, jog my memory. What was the last one we did where it was a committee of the whole? We did that a couple of months ago.
It was the Harmonia Shelter.
And that wasn't an application, was it?
No.
No, so I'm a little concerned.
I think due process requires that we give the applicant the opportunity to present.
Spoken like a lawyer, Nick.
Sorry.
You know, but wait, also, Nick, you have to apprise everyone that you're present but not entitled.
Yes, I'm on the board of the Flatiron Bid, so I can't vote on this.
A real interest there.
Well,
Here's
Renee, one second, along those lines.
I am as well. I
Renee's
mean, I'm
are you a voting member, Renee?
I'm not a voting member, so that's.
So maybe that
But
doesn't exclude.
this actually impacts my, as it does Layla's, impacts my neighborhood, where I live.
I'm trying to be consistent here, so bear with me. And those of you who've been on the board, there are very few of us now, Clayton and Layla, maybe EJ. If a committee doesn't have a quorum, and if an applicant goes to the committee meeting and makes their presentation, and the committee passes it on to the exec committee for their approval and to bring it to the full board, or if it goes from the exec committee to the full board as a committee of the whole, we have not in the past had presentations. I cannot think of one.
But
We've
at least,
never had anyone come into to exec to make a presentation.
right, but
Years, I don't remember ever having a presentation at full board for any.
No, never.
yeah, no, I agree with that. The only difference is that the applicant did get the opportunity to present at committee, even though there wasn't a quorum.
Well, so did they. They presented at Bex. They presented at Bex last month.
And this is the same application?
Yep.
I thought this is a different application. Now this is Euler.
No.
Be fair, when they came to us saying it was an update. We asked them specifically if it was an action item, and they said, no, this is an update. During the meeting, it transpired that there was going to be this action further down the pike. And as Marisa explained, the timing of that was unknown.
So, but if I understand correctly, when they came initially, they mentioned that the tax levied would be $1, and now when they came back, that fact has changed. So factually, the application has changed, let alone the fact that the pipeline process has now been better understood, and we know that it's a DCP action. Actually, just for the record, I went on the DCP portal. I cannot see the application.
I just emailed it to you, Layla, what we got in the office from DCP, and there's a link there.
Oh, okay.
So check that out and see if that gets you to it.
Okay.
I don't, what I have seen other community boards do, and I don't know if Community Board 5 has ever tried this, is that when an issue like this comes up, they call a pre-meeting of that particular committee just before the full board. And so that committee has basically a second meeting and votes on a particular application that then goes directly before the full board after that pre-meeting.
We used to do that years ago. We haven't done it in ages.
But in this case, that would be land use? No?
Yeah.
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 But is there even, we have 48 hours, is that, or less?
It's not this, the application, while there's a lot of information in their packet, it's not Layla's usual land use stuff. Do you know what I mean?
But it is ULURP. I mean,
Let me ask this question, because I'm really having a real problem with this. Marisa, I think you told me, or someone told me, that we don't really have to weigh in on this. Where did I hear that?
That's right. I mean, DCP doesn't need to hear from the community board to take the action. And so it is, not required as it is for normal ULURPs, as I understand it. So the application can go forward without any community board comment. They are seeking comment from both Community Board 4 and Community Board 5.
Layla, how does that sit with you?
I guess it's one of those very rare actions that DCP can take without any input from community boards, but typically any action or decision, whether it's a chair certification or an authorization or a special permit from the City Planning Commission, everything is referred to the community board. I mean, that the land use was the reason why community boards were created in the first place. So, maybe the specific action required for an amendment to a bid map is, one of those rare instances where community board input is not necessary. But I can't think of any other type of action where our comment is not part of the process.
Yeah, all right. So
Maybe that needs to be
let's say
confirmed tomorrow.
Let's say that's true. Let's say that's true. The other alternative is to simply retract our previous resolution and not be on record.
It
And
seems
the reason we're retracting it is because of a change of information that we did not have in time to weigh in. And if that is true, we don't need to weigh in. Why are we making ourselves crazy?
it seems to me, and this is just my personal opinion, that this is like, as Layla said, land use is one of the things that community boards were created. Like, this is a kind of a big deal for the area, right? And for our district. I mean, they've been at this, trying to expand it for months.
Years.
It's something that should be weighed in on by a community board. To punt on it doesn't seem right to me. That's just a personal opinion.
Is there an ability to have it postponed?
Our deadline is January 4th.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, can the applicant request a postponement of that, or
Oh,
is that
of the January 4th? Oh,
yeah?
So
that we can
typically
properly
with any land use action, unfortunately, when the clock starts ticking, short of the mayor issuing a executive order because of some disaster, as he did with COVID, where he suspended ULURP, the clock is ticking and you can't do anything.
Even because this situation seems a little bit different than typical ULURP. I wonder if this is different in that respect also. I don't know, because I think this is something that should be heard thoroughly.
Yeah.
Agree.
I mean, I almost wonder if it would make sense. I know it's a ridiculous time of year for it, but a special meeting to be called if land use meets, or a joint committee, or I don't know, so that we're not talking about something that's happening in 2 days.
After the board meeting? I'm okay with that if you guys want to do that. I mean, this is really convoluted the way we're trying to go at it otherwise.
If we were to do that, then
Then exec would have to ratify, would have to approve that action, and the full board in January would ratify it after the fact.
yeah.
That is what Community Board 4 is doing, because they have, they're not quite as tight as we are. They will be able to have another, a committee meeting for the application before that, but they won't have a full board vote yet. So they are just going to refer it through exec from their committee meeting.
And their land use committee, I'm assuming?
You know, I don't know, but I'll double check that. But I would assume, yeah. But I'll double check with Jesse.
So what do you think of that? Layla, Renee, you want to have a joint meeting?
I'm happy to do either. I'm happy if it's easier to go through Layla. I'm happy to do joint either.
So it would be a meeting that we would convene after the full board,
Yes.
but before the regularly scheduled committee meeting of January.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I would vote for the joint meeting because of the strange circumstance of Bex already having heard this. It'd be seems
I agree. I really feel if you're okay, Renee, I think it should be joint.
Yeah, they should be involved.
Absolutely, I agree.
not to mention that with two committees, given that it's going straight to exec, we've already have half the board having heard it, which helps.
Exactly.
So that would take care of your concern, Nick, on the ability for them to present.
Definitely. And I
Good.
think it would give it the hearing it deserves.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
That. Okay.
Shall we convene on Christmas Day?
All right. Is everyone okay with this?
Yes.
All right.
I'll bring the Chinese food, Clayton.
Do you want to discuss a potential day now, or so I can let Flatiron Bid know? Or
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Layla, Renee, you want to give Renee, you could do it at the end of the meeting, give them some dates that would work, that you think would work with getting the most members of your committee.
Okay.
Luckily, virtual is working out well. Do you know we have 49 members? Do you know we had 49 members in attendance last month? It's pretty amazing.
That's spectacular.
It is. It is.
Great.
I mean, a couple of them left in between, but at one point, we have
are they really in
49
attendance?
members.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So we do not put it on the agenda. We do not send out the old resolution. We leave it up to the two committees with a presentation from the Flatiron Bid to update our position. And it'll go, I'll call a special meeting of this meeting, the executive committee, because our exec meeting, I believe, is after the 4th also. So I'll call a special meeting and we will approve it with the understanding that the full board, has to be ratified by the full board at the January full board meeting. Is that it? Did I leave out anything? Okay. That was long, but it really worked out well, I think, in the long run. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can go into committee reports. Let's start with landmarks.
2 applications this month. The first one is 122 Fifth Avenue. This is in the Ladies Mile Historic District. This is an application that actually came to us last year. Last year, we didn't like it at all. and for a reason that kind of has nothing to do with us. I don't think we can take the credit on this one. The applicant nonetheless went back to the drawing board, and they came back with a much better proposal. So they're proposing storefront alterations, rooftop addition, landscape roof at the existing building, and a new building in the adjacent parking lot at 9 West 17th Street. That would be an extension of the existing building. So it's a very large T-shaped building that has frontage on 5th Avenue, 17 and 18th Street. And the applicant has an excess of development rights. And originally they wanted to build a very large and very visible rooftop addition, which we really didn't like. Somehow this addition was approved by LPC, although in a reduced version. And instead, they went back to the drawing board and they decided to infill this vacant parking lot and to also build a much more modest rooftop addition. Overall, we felt that it was good. We had some concerns about two aspects. The first one is the installation of flagpoles on the 5th Avenue facade, and they want 2 flagpoles. And the other issue we had was with a very, very large canopy that they want to install at the new building. And we felt that the canopy was simply, protruding so grossly out of the face of the building that was not appropriate. So those were our 2 concerns. The rest we felt was really good. We gave a lot of verbal praise to the applicant, and the rest also praises the applicant for the good quality of the work that they're proposing. It is a denial unless our 2 conditions are met, because we know that this is the semantics that actually carries more weight with LPC. But in essence, it is a conditional approval, and the vote was unanimous.
Okay. Is everybody okay? Does anyone have any questions before we move on? All right, seeing none, we go to the next. I'm sorry.
Okay, the next one, 18 East 50th Street. This is an individual landmark. It's right across from St. Patrick's Cathedral between 5th Avenue and Madison. Window replacement. They have crappy non-historic windows. They're proposing, they're non-historic obviously, but much less crappy windows. It's an improvement. It has some restorative components. We liked it. Approval, unanimous vote.
Good. Anybody have any questions? Okay, on to land use.
All right, land use. I thought we were going to need resuscitation at the end of the meeting. We had 5 items on the agenda. It was long, complicated, very important application. So let's jump right to it. Some of them were super technical. So I'm going to skim over all the technical stuff because we really dug deep at the at committee. 25 East 21st Street. This is a commercial building. It's actually a commercial condominium located in the Ladies Mile Historic District. Because it is a landmark building, then they are able to use a provision of the zoning resolution that allows for a use change, and they want to become a residential building. It is not a BSA permit. It is a kind of one of those non-discretionary applications where if they fit the criteria, then they are permitted to change the use. They wanted to, in order to be approved for use change, they have to preserve a certain percentage of the building as commercial. They want to keep a little less than what is required. Initially, they wanted to preserve 0, and we got them to agree to preserve 10%. The text says they should preserve 20%. We felt that we had reached a halfway through deal, and that it was good enough, and we voted to support. The vote was everybody in favor except one. Nancy voted against this application.
How many did you have, Layla?
I don't have the voting sheet in front of me. I believe it was
11?
11-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the one where she gave no reason, or is that the one?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the one she gave no reason.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have any question? Okay. 118, you want to do?
All right, so the next one, 118 West 28th Street. This is an application for a BSA variance to permit the development of a non-conforming 12-story mixed-use commercial and residential building. This is also in a manufacturing district, although it's in M16 district. This building is not landmarked. Therefore, this provision that applied to 21st Street does not apply to this particular site. The applicant wants to demolish the building and build a 12-story tower on a very, very narrow lot of that is 20 foot wide. The committee felt that so in order to be approved for a variance, the applicant needs to meet 5 findings. The committee reached the conclusion that 2 of the 5 findings were not met and voted to deny the application. We also raised the fact that a 20-foot wide lot is would lead to a sliver building. The Sliver Rule does not apply in manufacturing districts because residential buildings are not permitted. But given that if it becomes a residential building, it would have a residential zoning equivalent, then we're flagging that, we believe the Sliver Rule should apply. So the vote for this application was 10 in favor of a denial and 1 opposed.
What a Sliver Rule is?
What's that?
The Sliver Rule is actually a set of 2 articles of the zoning resolution that prohibit the construction of a residential or commercial building on a lot that is narrower than 25 feet. And so if you have a lot that is narrower than 25 feet, a building can be built, but it has to be, the height of the building is limited. It has to be either matching the lowest of the adjacent abutting buildings or the width of the street, if it's a narrow street, which would be 75 feet, whichever is lowest. So in that particular instance, the lowest of the 2 adjacent buildings is a 4-story building. So if DOB decides that that those articles apply, because through this variance that they're seeking, then they're becoming a R10, like a residential equivalent, then the building could not be higher than this 4-story building that is adjacent.
Any other questions? Okay with that?
All right.
All right.
So the next one, that was the pièce de résistance. Grand Hyatt Commodore Hotel is being redeveloped. It is located in the Greater East Midtown Special District. And the property has been acquired by RXR and Cornerstone in partnership. And they are proposing to demolish the existing building and redevelop a new building that would use all the provisions of the East Midtown subdistrict. So they would reach a I think they're going for 30 FAR. They would incorporate all the remaining available air rights from Grand Central Terminal, and they would also seek a special permit for an FAR bonus because they're going to do transit improvements. What we reviewed was the draft scope of work. So we did not really focus on the project itself. We really focused on the scope that is going to be utilized to determine the environmental impacts of the building. So basically, we looked at what you can expect with that kind of development, impact on transit, of course, impact on the blocking air and light that the building would cause, shadow impact, as the shadow is expected to reach as far as Bryant Park and possibly even further. We talked about pedestrian congestion. We talked about open space, as this building is mandated to create at least 10,000 square feet of publicly accessible open space. So we talked about all these good things. We talked about bathrooms, and we talked about the radius to which this environmental study should be done. We made a set of recommendations where basically we're flagging all these issues and asking the environmental study to be done, looking at specific impacts and broadening the radius. The TNE committee is going to look at the proposal and make some comments, which hopefully we can incorporate if need be. There is a hearing for this scoping document. There's a hearing at the City Planning Commission on December 20th. But we can provide comments, written comments, until January 12th. Hopefully TNE can be more granular in the transit, pedestrian, bus, subway, train, and vehicular traffic review. So we don't really have a position. We're basically listing the areas that we want to be particularly studied and how they should be studied.
Beautifully done. Really comprehensive. It's great.
It was.
I know. Along with 5, 6, 7, 6 other resolutions to be written. Pretty amazing. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? It's not often we get a 4-page resolution. Yes, Clayton.
So this is not a resolution though, right? This is a letter.
Well, it's a letter, yeah.
But so I'm curious which a letter is magnificent. I mean, it's not only comprehensive, it seems exhaustive, and I'm sure exhausting.
Yes.
Will the contents of the letter be in the reso packet, or is that appropriate?
This is one of those cases where I think it has to be, unless everyone.
I would really like that. It's a way too important project to keep that away from the rest of the membership. And I don't know how we go about. I mean, maybe we have to put it as a resolution and say, whereas we feel that those are the areas that need to be evaluated in the environmental impact statement, and therefore be it, we are in favor of our statement.
Do you remember how we did for East Midtown? Did we do a resolution, Clayton, or did we do? How did we do?
Based on the research that I've done through the website,
yeah,
we did not comment on the scope.
We didn't.
I couldn't find anything.
Oh my God.
I couldn't find anything. Kim is the wizard at finding those little.
The scope of the East Midtown rezoning?
Yeah.
No, I'm sure that we did. I mean, I feel like Eric read every page of it at the testimony.
No, we commented on the project, obviously.
But we didn't write.
but I don't know that we put anything in, or let me rephrase. I couldn't find it on the website. I
And
couldn't find it on the website.
And Kim looked as well?
I did not ask him to
Oh,
look it up. So there is hope, because she's really the wizard. She knows where things are.
I still have my whole file. Maybe I'll take a look. I think it's time to throw it out anyway, but I'll take one last look, kiss it goodbye, and away it goes.
I like Layla's idea of the reso, though. Why not?
I do too. Put that at the end, and that kind of covers us with letters.
Sorry, I have a couple questions. Layla, what would you prefer in terms of T&E's involvement? Making suggested additions to this letter as voted on Thursday, or bringing the applicant into the next T&E meeting? I mean, now that we know we can submit written comments until January 12th, bringing the applicant into the next T&E meeting, get a more specific presentation on the transit improvements, and then like T&E writing its own letter before January 12th.
I think it's better to submit everything at once. It's also, more efficient, because they have an obligation to respond to every single one of our comments. So I think that if we present something that is, sort of like a binder with everything together, all the pieces, all the elements that we want to comment on, it's going to be more efficient, so that, it doesn't fall through the cracks, and then we realize that, oh, oops, they forgot to address, one particular comment. So if you feel that your committee can provide all the comments that they wish to, and we can vote on it Thursday, that would be preferred.
I think we can. I would get your draft letter to them immediately, like tonight. And then we also still want to get that presentation with some of the more specific transit improvement proposals.
Yeah.
For them to review, as well as the scoping document, because those things were not in the scoping document. So however fast we can get that from the applicant would be preferable.
Yeah. Or when is the board meeting in January?
I just looked it up. It's not until the 14th. T&E itself meets on December 21st. Exec meets on the 12th, and then full board is the 14th.
Although it sounds like we're having a special session of exec for the Flatiron bid item, so.
So we could, okay, so here is a suggestion. We could present and review the letter Thursday night. T&E would get the benefit of a full presentation by the applicant on December 21st. We would blend T&E's additional comments into the document that came from land use. That document would be voted on by exec. That would we would send that as our official comment to DCP, and we would ratify this vote at full board on the 14th.
I guess I'm sorry, when was the hearing again?
When was what? Sorry.
When's the hearing? I guess
The
with
20th.
we wouldn't be able to read the final letter at the hearing. It would be submitted as a written comment.
The letter, in essence, would have to be a different thing and much shorter, because I think we're only given 2 minutes. So in any case, the letter would be a summary of the documents.
So what you're saying is only the letter that you've prepared, which will really be a reso because you're going to add a whereas and a resolve, will go to the full board on Thursday. That's what you're suggesting now.
No, no, it would go as a letter and a presentation item. EJ and TNE would have an opportunity to review the transit portion, would add language to it.
Oh,
It would be ratified, it would be voted on by exec. It would be delivered to DCP by January 12th, before the deadline, and it would be ratified by the full board on the 14th.
so Thursday night, you'll take questions and comments to tweak it,
Yes,
but we won't vote on it.
correct.
Okay.
And we'll just have to make sure that our additional exec, well, the additional exec meeting would have to come after the T&E meeting on December 21st and before comments are due on January 12th.
Yes, yeah.
Well, and actually before comments are due on January 4th for the bid,
Yeah, the other one.
if we're going to do this in one meeting.
Yes.
So Christmas Day it is.
Happy holidays. All right, is everybody okay with that? Phew.
Okay, great. Whew. All right, moving on. All right, then we reviewed the citywide zoning tax amendment for the zoning for coastal flood resiliency to update and make permanent the temporary 2013 flood resiliency zoning tax amendment. And you're going to wonder why we're even bothering. We're landlocked. We don't have any waterfront. So we wanted to make sure that the text, which is a citywide zoning text, would not have any unintended consequences to CB5. And some of these provisions overall make a lot of sense and are great and are wonderful. And it's city planning really doing their job. But we want to make sure that they're not plugging a loophole that would come and haunt us and would take forever for us to get rid of. So we did look at the text carefully, really from CB5's point of view, and pretty much it's all okay. The only exception is that the zoning text would allow for diesel generators to be installed in any building or property open space, which in outer boroughs, in areas that have single homes and that type of built environment, it makes a lot of sense. For us, our open space in a lot is basically our rear yard. And that text would basically allow for a developer to install a big noisy generator that would produce fumes onto this rear yard, which, although it would be unusual and it would be maybe even unlikely, we could totally see developers actually taking advantage of that, because that would be deducted from any FAR, from any floor area ratio. So we felt that having those big bulky things in an area that is meant to actually provide a little bit of quiet and air was really a bad idea. So we voted to basically express this concern. So honestly, after all that time, I don't even remember if we did a deny unless this article is taken out, as it applies to CB5. But basically, this is our concern, and it was unanimous vote.
Trying to remember what you did. But it was unanimous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I
All right,
think it was a conditional approval.
I think it was, yeah. All right, does anyone have any questions? No, got one more to go, Layla.
All right. And as you may know, Governor's Island is currently undergoing a major land use action that encompasses a number of different actions and upzoning and all sorts of other good things. Community Board 1 reached out to all the community boards in Manhattan and maybe community boards elsewhere. You know, I'm thinking of Brooklyn, given the proximity of Governor's Island with Brooklyn, to basically seek comments. So Governor's Island is part of CB1, but CB1 felt that, you know, it is more of a citywide issue than strictly a parochial issue. So we decided to look at the matter and make some comments. Aaron was actually super helpful in working on this. And basically, we're saying three things. The first one we're saying is that developing a park is really a bad idea, that parkland should remain parkland. It could be developed and enhanced for recreational activities such as you know, a ball field, tennis courts, but it has to remain a you know, publicly accessible, you know, active and recreational and passive use open space. We are saying that accessibility to Governor's Island is not properly assessed in this proposal, and that, you know, short of a true commitment to accessibility, any proposal, any land use action is going to be flawed. And then the third thing we're saying is that the rationale being used for the development of Governor's Island, which is basically the Governor's Island Trust, is saying that the park has to pay for itself. And that currently it costs $23 million, and that they need to basically raise $23 million annually to continue to you know, pay for all this maintenance and programming and whatnot. It is a very dangerous and slippery slope, because if all of a sudden all our parks are required to cover all their operating expense themselves, currently it's already the case for a number of our parks. But if those parks fail to do so through programming, then it means that they can start building to raise funds. And with that rationale, then are we developing condos in Central Park? So the rationale being used is very, very dangerous. So we're basically flagging that in our comments.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments on that one or questions? All right. That ends it for you, Layla.
That was it for us.
Okay, thank you so much. That moves us into, what do we have left? Parks.
Okay, so we have two resolutions this cycle, and the first is our favorite topic, the creation of the position of the Director of the Public Realm. We decided to call this back in order to turn our prior letter of support into a resolution and to add just updates from the applicant, not the applicant, but from the Municipal Art Society. And given also that we've since heard this at Bex and at full board. So this resolution doesn't really add more to the conversation past what we heard 3 months ago when we wrote our letter of a position of support, but we did not end up sending that letter since as full board, we knew we were going to hear this as part of the budget cycle. So we held off on that and now have turned it into this resolution. The idea being that a stronger position to take would be for CB5 to have passed a full board resolution on the matter. So it was a unanimous vote of support and endorsing the proposal from Municipal Art Society for the creation of this position, 17 people.
Okay, that's great. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Quick comment. Can we make sure that this is sent to the Department of City Planning as well as the City Planning Commission, like to each commissioner?
Great.
Okay.
Marisa, can you note that too? Thank you.
Okay. And the other one, Clayton?
And then the other one is, believe it or not, a marketing event application in Madison Square Park. This is their first event application of the year and will be the only. As you know, they are contractually authorized to have up to 4 marketing events without any of their normal sources of revenue. This year, Madison Square Park Conservancy has been moving through considerable reserves that they had to keep their staff fully on payroll and with health insurance, et cetera, throughout this whole thing, and the park in great shape. And you know, it's a real bastion for people, obviously, in our district. So they were relieved to get an event application. The event, such as it is more of an installation of a big red kettle, which is kind of like a big poster for the Salvation Army to remind people that they exist, that there will be no bell ringing or coins happening this year because of COVID, and to encourage people to do online donations. I mean, that's the idea. There's nothing about this installation is going to involve any amplified sound or any handouts or flyers or anything of the sort. It's basically just a big red kettle. It is in the southwest gravel area of the park. Through our normal matrix parameters, there was nothing about this that really was a red flag for us. And we did vote to approve it by 13 with 3 abstentions. With 3 abstentions, this was the conversation that resulted in the very first abstentions I've ever had at my committee. And I was so shocked by it that I failed to address in real time Vicky's critical point that an abstention is not neutral. So sorry about that. We had 3 abstentions based on the nature of the Salvation Army and people's personal beliefs about not wanting to do anything to show any support for that organization. We had a very, very long debate about this, and I will sum up that debate basically by sharing with you that while everyone is, of course, entitled to their opinion, we have not, as a board, and certainly not as a committee, reviewed the ethical nature of the content of an organization or company's work as part of the merits of a permit application. That's not part of the matrix. It's not been part of any other review or due diligence that we have ever done. And so it became a very strange question of, well, if we're going to weigh in on this here, then where does the questioning stop? Do we ask every applicant of every committee anything we can think of about any corner of their business practices, and will that weigh in on any permit application? So that's the short version of the conversation. In the end, those 3 people did abstain, and passed with 13 votes in support.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on that or questions? It was interesting.
Is that an issue that could be addressed in the same way that you talk about abstentions? You know, that exactly what Clayton said, that this is not something that is looked at? Because I know this tangentially has come up in landmarks as well, Leila.
Yeah, when people start talking about use, Leila's very, very strong on telling them, I'm sorry, we don't do that. We're not discussing that now. As she will do on the whole scoping letter. She will say, right, Leila, that this is to do with what's in scope, not whether or not we think the Hyatt is beautiful or whatever. It's all part of
I think that the only time we comment on the character of an applicant is when said character has an impact on the application. You know, let's say we know that a property owner does a terrible job with their buildings and that they're negligent. Okay, it's totally relevant. If we have a developer who is a convicted felon, we're not going to take that into account. That's not relevant. You know, if they're doing a good job as a developer, then, or if the applicant is solid, then we look at the merits of the application. So I think that the character should not really get in the way unless it has a direct connection with the application.
And I think that was the position of the majority of the committee by far.
And you addressed that at some point too, Clayton. You did talk about that.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Yeah. I think, Renee, it definitely is something that we should talk about, because we do have so many new people on the board, and I think it has to be discussed at the committee level, which, as Clayton did, he brought it up, Layla does. But even so, I think it should go to the full board. There may be committees that have nothing to do with that sort of thing, and so it's not, they're not familiar with the fact that this is not something that we deal with in, you know, looking at the merits of the application. But I don't want to do it this week. Again, it looks like I'm scolding, but it is a good thing. Yes, Sam.
I just have a quick question for Clayton.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, why did the people who had a problem with the Salvation Army abstain rather than vote no?
And this is interesting because it's an interesting conversation about when someone might feel entitled or preferring to abstain versus vote no. And in this case, the committee member who led the opposition to that application based on these parameters wanted to abstain rather than vote no out of support for the committee and out of an acknowledgement that the things that she was opposed to were not within the purview of the due diligence and deliberation that we do of the actual application before us. So she was acknowledging that it was kind of outside of the bounds of the normal way to deliberate when she reached her conclusion, and therefore wanted to abstain rather than vote no, since she did not agree that it was a no vote based on the merits of the application. So
It's very, it could be problematic even when we talk about it on Thursday night, because people will probably say, could someone who abstained please explain why? And then you're bringing into the conversation, which I'm not going to allow. I'll let them answer, but I won't allow a conversation about their answer. I can't stop them from saying, here's the reason why, but I have to say, if anyone else jumps on that and says, well, I'd like to also, you know, talk about that, I have to say, I'm sorry, that's not within our guidelines purview or how we address this, just what Clayton and Layla have now said.
But they can only do that during comments, right?
What's that?
They only do that during comments.
Well, usually, what do I do when somebody asks the question? Then I usually say, I'm sorry, that's something for that person to comment on during comments. Is that correct?
If they would like, yeah, because it's not a question to the resolution.
Right, exactly. That helps. But it is interesting because you can't stop someone from, you know, voicing their opinion. You just can't do it. Anything else?
that was it.
Okay. Renee, do you have a report?
Mute. I do. We had 4 items, and none of them were action items, although I guess perhaps the Flatiron Bid should have been. Our first item, we had presentation from DHS, Breaking Ground, and the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene. The expectation was that this was going to be a really tough discussion, and it was surprisingly not. DHS really went through the number of shelters in our district, how they were cited. There were questions that were taken, some beforehand, some were presented beforehand to the board office. Others came in on the question and answer that was monitored by Julie and Joseph Fuhrer. Basically, the providers explained what they each did, what Breaking Ground was seeing on the ground with the homeless population. DHS explained why they cited the homeless population in the hotels, where they were located generally, not very specifically, but the numbers. People were told what to do when they saw behaviors on the street that were frightening or when people needed help. it went pretty well for questions that were not addressed during the presentation. Marisa was fantastic, and she followed up on some of the questions where we didn't have the answers at that time, and we followed up after the fact. So I think it went reasonably well. The rationale for that was that we were getting a lot of complaints about particularly 2 of the hotels on the West 50s and 2 in the West 30s. So that was the rationale for that presentation.
Do you want to update the board on that or not? Is your, the 4 issues that were discussed, do you want to bring them as a report to the board?
We can, I mean, I can just do a brief summary of, what was reported. You want to talk about the number of hotels that are used? Is that what you're saying? You want me to explain that in more detail?
No, I'm just, no, I'm just saying, do you want to, we have it here as your information to us on exec.
Right.
Are you planning, or do you think it's important, or does everyone think it's important that the full board hear what Bex did, what Bex heard this month?
My own view is maybe rather not. I don't want the homeless issue to sort of start the process again. I think sometimes people ask the questions again and again because they don't like the answers, and that could sort of rev up that engine. I think
there's nothing we can do about it at this point.
Right. Okay. Right. I think the Flatiron bid issue, we're going to be addressing that further. And so there's not really, we need to go through that.
Out, right?
Right. The second thing that we had was a film that we had from the Great American Smokeout. And so it was the high school students from High School of the Future came in. There was a Black Lives, Black Lungs movie, little 15-minute movie that was sent to us beforehand. And we had a quick discussion about that, how communities of color have been targeted by the tobacco companies. And that's something they're trying to, that message they're trying to disseminate. So that was one of the presentations. They said that they will be coming back to us, and it was really great because these kids made this video. That may be one item that you may want me to report on. And then the final item is that Zach Behar, and we talked about this with EJ, there's some legislation coming online that affects vendors, and it's about expanding the number of permits. It's about creating an office or some unknown entity, we're not sure where it would land, that will sort of police the vendors. This is something that we've always looked at. The bid's testimony to the New York Council is that vendors negatively impact their businesses. But the Street Vendor Project notes that, this is primarily immigrants, people of color. So this was just sort of teasing out, this is a controversial issue, is sort of teasing out what we need to know. One of the things on Bex is that when we get these really complicated issues, like police defunding, we rush it through. And so we really wanted to tease this out and work with EJ on this and sort of figure out what we don't know and who we needed to talk to make it sort of more comprehensive when it comes to one of the committees. And so we're going to share Zach's report with EJ and his committee.
Okay. I would report on the smokeout. That's kind of interesting. And the high school students were great. They were, I think it was something very nice to.
May we share that video? Is there some way we can share that to the full board? That would be great.
Not at the full board meeting, because that would open up a whole, for other videos, but we could, I guess, Marisa, we could send it to all board members.
Yeah, we can. This is an instance where we could post the link to the video in the chat, for example.
That's good.
One thing I was going to ask about the homeless, following on from what we heard in Bex, and I know that we were supposed to look at the website, is we have something for, people who live and work in the district, and we have something about, if you hear noises like from Nick's committee for liquor licenses, could we do the same about 311 if we see, a homeless person or person in mental distress, the exact same thing here, the steps you should follow?
Yes, planning on doing that as soon as we get through this week.
Right. Sorry, I feel like I always dump on you, Marisa.
No, we're absolutely planning on doing this. So it's on my list, and just want to format it nicely and put it out as a one-pager. The other thing, Renee, just to let you know, Luke and I are doing a follow-up meeting with some residents on 35th Street to kind of clarify some of the things that DHS talked about at the BEX meeting. Again, I think they didn't necessarily like the answers and want to hear them a different way, but the answers will be the same.
Always, right? I feel like the conversation just.
Is it too early, Renee, or do we want to talk about the public toilets and what we're, maybe have Julie give an update, or is it a little too early now? Julie, what do you think?
I think it's a little too early. DOT has been non-responsive when I follow up with them.
Okay.
I know, Clayton, you're trying to push it for January 4th, but
Yeah,
if they don't provide information.
Okay.
Can I just add to that, in terms of public toilets, what we're talking about between Julie and Clayton is the APTs, right? And so they're the automatic public toilets that are in storage. But public toilets as a general rule, like there's other ways of doing that, whether, and maybe that's something that the board should start consider, like in the way we've done with Director of the Public Realm. Like public toilets is a huge issue. I mean, it comes up again and again when we talk about homelessness and people on the streets and all of that. It's a huge issue. And maybe we shouldn't be constrained to the APTs and getting parks approval. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
And that just also jogs something. I got a very, I think, strange phone call from someone asking, well, let me ask the question. They wanted to know if those public toilets, the ones that we have, that the city has, that are sitting around, can they be put inside? And the reason they're asking is they wanted to know if the answer is no. Okay.
Yeah, they have to be hooked up to utilities to work. Electrical, water.
Because the question was, they watched Layla's meeting and said, why couldn't we put those toilets in the redo of the Grand Hyatt? In the subway upgrades and so on. And I hadn't a clue whether we can or not. It didn't sound like it works, but the answer is no. Okay, good to know. All right, that's it, Renee. Then you'll report on the smoke out, and we'll give everybody a link and really encourage them to watch it. I thought it was a really good one. It's one of the nicer things that we deal with, especially when it's with the kids. So that was great. Was there anything else? I think those were the 4 issues, and the 3 of them are kind of being worked on right now.
Right.
Okay. Nick, do you have anything you want to update the board on for PSQL?
Not the full board, but I did want to update the exec committee on something, if I may. So if the committee remembers, we dealt with the glass ceiling events application, which is a rooftop application right next door to Gilsey House. We denied their full liquor license application, and the SLA supported our denial of that license. The applicant reapplied for a wine and beer license, and over our objection, the SLA today granted that license. They severely restricted it. They restricted the hours to 8 p.m. outdoors, 9 p.m. indoors. They imposed some significant restrictions, but still, they did grant the wine and beer license.
Is it true that Councilmember Powers changed and then supported it? Yeah.
Yes. And the SLA did refer to that as a reason why that they were granting the license.
And what was that? I'm sorry.
Keith Powers supported their application.
Oh my God. Why?
Do we want the real reason? We're being recorded. The applicant hired a lobbyist, and I suspect that the lobbyist was influential in
Who is the lobbyist? Do you know?
We do.
Yeah, we do. They contacted us as well several times.
And the other thing that was disturbing is, even though we're recording, I'm going to say it, the fact that it almost went through without even going to us. Nick, if you want to explain how it was caught.
Yeah, we were caught by surprise. This hearing, they scheduled this for the full board of the SLA, I think it was 2 weeks ago, without giving us notice, without giving the Gilsey House notice, without giving anyone notice. And the attorney for the Gilsey House saw that it was on the calendar, literally put on the night before. And we all had to object because we weren't given notice, so they postponed it for 2 weeks. But it was interesting that it wasn't really calendared in advance, and none of the people who were on record opposing the license were given notice of the hearing.
This is very, very disappointing, and this is really where distrust stems from, and it's a problem. It's really a problem.
I was just trying to think of those instances where CB5 in particular has taken a position and an elected has gone against us. You really have to think. And then my question to myself is, should we say anything?
I'm going to jump right in. I think that this cannot be left unaddressed. It cannot be left unaddressed, especially given how sneaky, everybody ended up trying to act. I'm referring to the applicant and the SLA. Somehow that kind of MO manifests itself after the applicant hires a lobbyist. I think it is really very problematic, and I think it has to be said.
I agree.
Well, I agree as well, especially how much public outrage there was in that meeting. I mean, that was a terrible meeting, and for them to, for them to move forward, I almost think it's almost on notification of the community that that's happening is almost key, because like you're saying, if no one knows that's happening, no one's gonna object. It feels like almost shady that there's that it's so quiet.
Definitely. Nick, do you want to draft something?
Sure.
I think we should say something. I really
we might even want to make a call to Keith Power's office.
Yeah.
Are you sure that you don't want to give that report to the full board, Nick?
I can, if you like. If you think, the board did weigh in on this.
I would love, if we're going to do a letter, then I would love the full board to hear about it. Okay. I think that they should know why we're sending a letter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only power we have. Bringing stuff out in the public. That's the only power we have.
Yeah.
And on this one, it is so disappointing. It is so unfair of the applicant. It really reflects very poorly on their business ethics and their character. It is very disappointing of our council member to, take a position that goes against our recommendation.
Go ahead, Nick.
I can certainly stress that point. I'm wary about saying anything about the SLAs failing to notify, and sort of assigning any suspicion to that. I can certainly state the facts. I also don't know, how relevant it is to disclose that they hired a lobbyist, although I could probably say that, we were contacted by a lobbyist and we suspect, because we don't really know. I don't know. It's really conjecture.
I think sticking to the facts is absolutely damning enough.
Okay.
And
you don't have to editorialize in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Just state the facts.
Great.
And I think the only part where we can comment is that it is disappointing that our council member decided to vote against the position of the board.
That's a fact too.
And that's a fact.
Yeah. And I think that, again, if we're going to write the letter, then the full board should know and hear exactly what went down, because that letter will not go back to the board for approval. But if everybody has heard it and no one has said, hey, wait a minute, I think it's a great idea that they got their, that they went against our recommendation. Then, it just makes it a stronger reason for us to send letters and to make as Layla says, our voices heard, because that's really the only thing we do have. You're absolutely right.
Also, to put a fine point on it about the council member, it's not just going against the position of the board. It's, if memory serves, changing his own position in contradiction of the board's position as well. Because at the time of our initial opposition, he backed us up then.
This was sort of a different application. He was supportive of the wine and beer. I think he continues to oppose full liquor.
I see.
So there's some gray area there.
Mm-hmm.
Nick, do we have a position on the wine and beer?
We declined. We denied the application on the same grounds.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, great. So that'll be a report that goes on the agenda, Marisa, as well.
Yeah. You want to give a heads up to Councilmember Power's office?
I'm afraid I'm going to answer too quickly. I'll let everybody else answer.
I would say yes, I think so.
You're a better person than I
Stab
am.
people in the front, we don't stab them in the back.
Say that again?
We stab people in the front, we don't stab them in the back.
Okay.
It's a personal comment. It's just,
That's fine. That's fine.
I agree.
I agree too.
Everybody
I'll let them know to come prepared.
What's that?
I said, I'll let them know to come prepared.
I agree.
As we were. Sorry. Okay.
The worst thing they can do is explain themselves. And if they explain themselves in front of the group, that's not a bad thing if we hear why he changed his mind. I mean, I'd be curious, quite frankly. So if they know ahead of time, we might get some answer. It might be a political answer, but it's at least something. So.
I mean, speaking as a former rep for an elected official, the worst thing you can do is go to a meeting, have the wrong person at the meeting to answer questions. So if you can just make sure the right person is at the meeting, and they will explain themselves or not, but you at least have the person there that can explain the position.
Okay. I'll go along with the group. All right, we need order, the order of the reports.
I'm sorry, I have to jump off.
Okay, it doesn't matter where you are?
I don't think so. I think the public might be interested in commenting on Keith Powers, but
You
that's
want
up to
it
you.
early or you want
Maybe, because the public has been very vocal about this.
to go first?
I don't know if this deserves to be first, but whatever you think. Renee's shaking her head.
I say yes.
Yeah, me too.
Okay,
All right,
okay, goodbye.
I got to go. Sorry, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we start with PSQL report, which means that I think what Nick was saying was that it'll be on the agenda and people might come and speak about it. Isn't that what he was referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay. And then you want to do landmarks with Layla, you like to break in between yours. So you want to put Renee in the middle for her report and then.
Yeah, maybe we can start with land use because we did have a large attendance to the land use committee meeting. In the end, not that many people spoke, but certainly there were lots of people who were interested.
Yep.
So maybe we put land use after PSQL.
Okay. So PSQL, land use, then.
And sorry, just what's the order for land use? What do you want to talk about of those applications, in what order?
Is it okay if maybe I send you an email a little bit later this evening with the order?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Okay. Then, Clayton, do you want to go or do you want Renee?
Sure. I don't care. I'm happy with whatever.
Okay.
I don't mind either.
You'll be third. Parks will be third.
Okay.
And then landmarks, Layla?
Yeah, that
So
will be
how about we do Renee's report and then landmarks? Is that okay?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Is that all right, Renee?
Perfect.
Okay. All right, Marisa, you have that? PSQL, land use, parks, budget report, and then landmarks.
And Clayton, does it, do you want to do those in a particular order?
I would do public realm first.
Mhm.
Thanks. Okay,
Hey,
guys.
have a lot of other boards done the public realm now at this stage? Do you know?
I don't think so. I
No.
actually don't think so, and I'm hoping that changes.
I know, and we keep talking about it at Borough Board, and Gail keeps bringing it up, and I keep saying, you know, ask for it. I don't know why. I don't know what's
We
going
can't
on.
do it for them, you know.
No, I don't understand it. And they're all like kind of agog. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Let's do
Yeah.
it. And then they do nothing. I don't know.
All right, gang, I gotta hop.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. This was a long but good meeting. I appreciate all the input. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
See you on Thursday.
See you Thursday.